self-empowerment versus victim mentality. Let us talk about different ways of thinking that people employ. We're going to focus today on the spectrum of people who think in terms of self-empowerment approaches versus people who tend to have more of a victim mentality. As with most personality characteristics, not all people fall into a dichotomous category, and people will fall somewhere along a spectrum. But for the sake of discussion, we'll talk about the two extremes. We'll discuss first the differences between these two ways of thinking and discuss the risks and benefits of each approach. What is the victim mentality? The victim mentality occurs when a person experiences something negative. The following are examples of something negative that a person might experience. They didn't get the job that they were applying for. They had a dispute with a coworker, friend, or significant other. They feel that someone has tried to diminish their self-esteem. Let's examine the first example. Someone did not get a job that they were applying for. A person with the victim mentality tends to believe that the reason was due to an external reason. Some examples: the employer was racist, the employer was sexist, the employer was biased against their religious affiliation, the employer was biased against their appearance, the employer was biased against their gender or sexual preference. Firstly, let us state that sometimes these biases do occur. That being said, the person with the victim mentality often defaults to this explanation for why they didn't get the job. A person with a self-empowerment mentality might be more likely to believe that they did not get the job because I did not do as well as I could have on the interview. I'll work on refining the skill. I did not highlight my valuable experiences as much as I could have on my CV. I did not have as much requisite experience that would have made me a competitive candidate. I will seek out such experience. Now, let's look at the second example. An individual has a dispute with a coworker, friend, or significant other. The person with the victim mentality might assume, this person does not like me, this person is trying to hurt me, this person is using me, this person is jealous or envious. Again, it is possible that any one or more of these things is actually true. However, the error is in making this the default explanation adopted. A person with a self-empowerment approach is more likely to think, the other person is having a bad day, the other person said something in the heat of anger that they do not really mean, I may have misinterpreted this individual, let me think about if there is a different way I can interpret this person's communication. This person is just a poor communicator. How can I benefit by improving my communication style appropriate for dealing with this particular individual? Let's look at the final example of an individual feeling that someone is trying to reduce their self-esteem. The person with a victimization viewpoint may presume, this person wants to reduce my self-esteem. This person is jealous or envious. This person does not want me to succeed. A person with a self-improvement mentality might think, was the individual really criticizing me? When they said you look good, were they mocking me or was that actually a compliment? A person with a self-empowerment viewpoint is more likely to believe that it was a compliment, whereas a person with a victim mentality may believe that they are being insulted. A person with a self-empowerment mentality might think, was the individual criticizing me with a malignant intention, or was the criticism meant to be constructive? How can I take this criticism in the most constructive way despite what their actual intention was? Is there a need for me to improve? Now that we've highlighted the differences between people who approach issues with these two types of views, let's talk about why it is empowering to utilize the one way of thinking compared to the other. The person who is using the self-empowerment train of thought is an individual who is taking control of their own life. They have the power of self-determination. The reason is as follows. The person using the self-empowerment way of thinking tends to default to an internal or personal reason for the negative circumstance. If the negative outcome is perceived to be related to an internal reason, then this person is always in control of the situation because they are in charge of themselves. The person with the victim mentality tends to attribute the negative circumstance to something external, another person, society, lack of opportunity, poor genetics, and so on. When you attribute the fault to something outside of you, it is very difficult to change that external influence. It is hard to change other people's behavior or change society or the world or your genetics. Thus, people who adopt this type of mentality feel more powerless in terms of being able to change these negative circumstances that they face. This is not to say that prejudice, bigotry, and other forms of oppression or inequality do not exist. They certainly do. Further, the idea is not to blame the victim. The idea is to empower those who feel victimized. From the perspective of personal health and success, looking at the glass half full, or the most positive perspective, in which each individual has the power to enact personal improvement or adopt beneficial perspectives or to find other ways to capitalize on one's own strengths, is clearly the more empowering approach of the two. The self-empowerment approach is more likely to lead to satisfaction and long-lasting happiness. Self-empowerment. Being self-empowered means to understand that you are in charge of how you perceive each unique situation. No one has the power to control your emotions or your success except for yourself. Take charge of your own life.